All right. Welcome to I guess it would be our kind of our first, but what we're going to be doing here on Saturday mornings is releasing a best of. Today it's just me setting it up, but in the future it'll be more of us. And sometimes it won't be all four, but we'll be setting some stuff up. Sometimes it'll be funny. Sometimes it'll be one of the more serious stories, but just the story. And just to put, go back and do like a best of, like I said. But this today is, and before I start, with likes, subscribes, and shares mean a lot to us. Getting pretty big audiences, so that's neat for us. And then we're going live every Thursday on Facebook and YouTube at 6:00. We'll be down at Columbo's, and then we'll be putting out stories throughout the week. We're not going to do many of the serious stories down from Columbo's, but we'll have some personalities on. Got some neat guests coming up. Kind of more of a St. Louis thing sometimes than just law enforcement on those Thursdays. But we will tell, several law enforcement stories and stories about us and other people that join us. So it'll be fun still. And we had a lot of fun last week, even though it was very hectic. It was our first time, and Jack and Jake, who do our video, did a great job. It was pretty neat to watch them. They had to figure some stuff out, so it took a little longer. But we had a lot of fun, and Danny will be back in town too. I think he'll add to that ridiculousness, so that'll be fun. And but this week we have the story, Joe Spiess from the chief from Brentwood. He arrested a guy back when he was a detective, back in the 90s, I think. So he tells the story of how he arrested him, and then when he got out of prison, he came and seen Joe, and he got him a job. So that's our story for today. And but we'll be back, and we'll kind of make some more out of this Saturday morning releases and make it more entertaining. But today it's just old me throwing it out here. And hope you enjoy. Send the comments, other stories that you might find interesting from the past that you want us to put out here that you think some of our newer followers would like. Send us a message. The brighter side of blue at gmail.com, or our website, which is the brighter side of blue.com. So enjoy, and we'll see you next week. Peace.
It's just a neat story. And Joe, the fellow's name is D'Angelo. Just a little about the case that you were working, who you were working with, what time in your career you were working with it, and why Mr. went to jail.
So at the time I was assigned to the intelligence division working for then Lieutenant Hager, who has been on your show, later to become Captain Hager.
Major.
And we were investigating, and then Major, yeah. But we were investigating a drug ring in St. Louis that had ties to Los Angeles. So we're bringing in a lot of dope out of L.A. And we found out that D'Angelo was one of the lower rung guys, but he was pumping a lot of dope onto the street. So the idea was we were going to focus on D'Angelo, who went by Low, so that he would flip on the guy that we were really targeting, which was a guy named Antonio Johnson, who went by Yum Yum. That was his nickname in the streets. And he was hooked up with a guy named Keith Williams, who owned a store over at Page and Pendleton. It was an organization of guys that were selling dope in St. Louis. Really typical stuff, but they were on the upper side of the weight that they were selling. So we started investigating D'Angelo. We weren't the only ones, as we come to find out, that were looking at him. But we did a case on D'Angelo, got him with some heroin. There was also guys, other detectives that were looking at him, and they also had a case on him. So he was backed up because he was already convicted. And so when we arrested D'Angelo, we brought him into the station, and he decided he wanted to try and help himself. So Lowe was probably one of the more colorful guys I ever locked up. Funny. Was one of those guys that when I first met D'Angelo, I always liked him. I first met D'Angelo when I was a couple of years, maybe a year prior to this, in the old Cabinet Courts.
Oh, wow.
My partner had called in on vacation day, so my dumb ass was riding around in the 7th District by myself, the old 7th District.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is a year before we caught D'Angelo. and I hear multiple shots fired. I'm talking 20 or 30 rounds. And they're right near me, but I'm not exactly sure where. And I'm on a dead-end street in the 7th District, and here comes D'Angelo and another dude, guns in hands, running through a gangway right at me. I'm by myself. Think I'm with my 6-shot revolver.
Reload if necessary.
And they ran right by my detective car and into a car, and I flip around on them, and I chase them. And they pull over, and they bail out of the car. And the guy that I'm young now. I'm in good shape, and I can run.
Long time ago?
Yeah, I got D'Angelo, and he drops the gun, and he gives up. And he told me that later that day, and it ended up being a case where they were involved. They went up and tried to assassinate a guy in the Cavaney courts, missed him. We didn't have a victim. That case went nowhere. But he told me later that day, I said, when I'm interviewing him, I said, you could have got me when you came out of the gangway. He goes, I will never hurt a policeman. And I always remember that about D'Angelo, and I always admired him for it. He was in the game, and he was a killing machine, but he would never hurt a policeman. So he always had a little place in my heart because of it. Fast forward, though, we wasn't like weren't trying to put Lowe in penitentiary.
Right.
We get a case.
He was doing wrong.
Oh, yeah, he was.
Right.
And so by the time that we dumped into him a year later, he's now advanced well into the heroin game, and he's selling a lot of heroin.
And has moved up in the game.
He moved up
like
in the
the
game.
dope game is just like the
his
police.
area Cavaney Court still?
Right.
He was, really, it was anything in the 8th District.
Okay.
I'm surprised that you didn't know him.
Well, Cavaney Courts has not gotten any better.
Did you ever run into him when you were in the 8th District?
Wasn't it Cavaney's in the 7th?
7th? Yeah.
That's where he liked to sell his dope.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's still shithole.
So about 6 months prior to us locking him up as part of this case on Antonio Johnson and Keith Williams, they tried to assassinate Lowe as he came into his apartment over right in the 7th District there. He came in through the common entrance, got shot 6 times.
Yeah.
And almost killed him. It was real close. They blew his right hand. He never had a good use of his right hand again. So, again, now we're fast forward. Now we've got him in custody, and he's snitching. And he laid out the whole organization, he told us how the dope was coming in out of Los Angeles, and we started the case in earnest on Antonio Johnson and Keith Williams, using him and he was pumping us information on a regular basis. And during this time, probably about 3 months after he started snitching for us, the 3rd District got a call for a guy wrapped up in a blanket he was in a rug or rolled up and shot 9 times, if I recall. Well, everyone knew that was the guy that had shot D'Angelo a few months earlier, a year earlier. So we bring D'Angelo in. Homicide wants to talk to him. We're like, hey, dude. And he's snitching for us at the time. And we're like, hey, they found whatever the guy's name was with a bunch of holes in him over. And he never confessed to us, but he just smiled. And that was how the world was then,
Gave you the old little wink, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's how the world was.
Right.
It's just getting
it was street justice, and I'm not condoning it,
right?
But we certainly couldn't prove it either.
And I think too is
so
that
you never did prove that he was the one.
We couldn't. No, homicide never put that case on.
Okay.
And when you get into that game, that dope game, they all realize that there's a possibility. It's just like getting into the mafia, the old Sammy the Bull, and that there's rules in that whole game. And if you break the rules, there'll be people out ready to kill you.
Yeah,
that's just the way life is.
That's the way it was. But when we started working with Lowe, the first I'll never forget it. My partner at the time was Joe Myers, one of the best guys I ever worked with in the police department. But Joe and I were in a van, and Lowe was very cautious. Obviously, he didn't want to be seen around the police. Obviously. So we met at Skinker and Delmar and in a back lot, and he gets in a van, and I did not like what I saw. I didn't trust this kid further than I could throw him. He grew up in the 8th District, and he was one of the most violent guys I ever met. But again, he wouldn't hurt a policeman.
Yeah.
But he gets in this van, and I'm like, every spidey sense in my police self was saying,
pull that van over.
No, he got in our van. We were in an undercover van.
Oh, okay.
And he stepped in that van, and I was like, get out of the van. And my partner looked at me and asked, we get him out. He's got a 9mm pistol in his waistband. And anyway, so we take his gun. And, we didn't lock him up, but we said, hey, dude, you cannot do this. You cannot.
Please don't do this no more.
You can't do this, But, hey, you can tell just by my 5 minutes of that story, there were people hunting him.
Right.
Not us, and necessarily, but
Right.
the bad guys, other
Right.
gang members and other dope men were after him hard. And we took his thumper. He always called it a thumper. He goes, I don't go anywhere without a thumper. And he called me Joe Man. As we got our relationship, after he started snitching, he used to call me Joe Man. He goes, Joe Man, I never go anywhere without a thumper. So, okay. So fast forward, the case goes, and we get Antonio Johnson and Keith Williams tied up in a conspiracy case out of Los Angeles, including their source, and we take the case off. And it culminated with Lowe ordering up dope. And we had all these search warrants signed and ready to go. They had a car wash. Yum Yum had a car wash. You might remember it over at Del Mar. It was all the Crips and Bloods from L.A. were in there all the time. And so we had all these warrants. It's a great case. D'Angelo did a great job as an informant, including taped calls and a whole 9 yards. He was all in on being.
He was having fun.
Doing it. Well, it was either that or he was going to go to the penitentiary for 25 years.
Right.
Because he was backed up bad on the dope cases he had. So we do all these cases. We end up locking up Antonio Johnson, Keith Williams, the L.A. guys, the whole 9 yards. They all the federal prosecutors did the case. And so fast forward a couple of months later, now it's time to go to the
Trial.
Well, it's the first. He's got to come to the grand jury and testify. He's got to, we have to turn over these tape-recorded calls that we had a lot of them over the course of this investigation. And so he comes into the office and he said, Joe, man, I can't do it. I go, what can't you do? He goes, I can't do it. I can't testify. I go, Lo, you've done everything that you had to do. Now because the feds were promising him,
Leniency.
relief from his cases in state court. We already had the state prosecutors involved in it. I'm not saying he would have got a complete pass on his state cases, but I'm pretty confident he might have. And he was literally looking at 25 years in the penitentiary in state court. And he wouldn't do it. I said, you're going to go to prison for 25 years. And he goes, I'll go. So that's what happened. We went to trial. We presented all the evidence, all the calls, all the drugs, everything we had. Everybody got convicted, including Lowe. And he went to prison for, I think, 22 years.
Jeez.
Yeah.
But there is an ending to this story that is, again, just as I led into this story, I say how we all lock people up, and that's all fine and dandy, and that's great. But Lowe comes out of jail, and where are you at when Lowe comes out of jail, and what happens?
Yeah, so he does about 18 years off his 22-year sentence. And at the time, and I'd just like to reiterate and really emphasize, this is one of the most violent kids I ever dealt with as a policeman. Not to me and not to an officer, but this guy was a killing machine. The guy in the rug wasn't the only guy he ever killed in his life. So while I liked
Allegedly killed.
Yeah, legend. While I liked him, I didn't trust him further than I could throw him. And I always thought, in my mind, that he thought I was the one that really screwed him and put him in a penitentiary for most of his adult life, Yeah. And I was. Joe and Myers and I both, wasn't our choice, but that's the way his life ended, Anyway, so I'm now the police chief in Brentwood. Many, 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 many years later. I had retired as a major from the city police department and took a job in the Brentwood Police Department as the chief of police. And Tom Bottini was working the desk.
And just to put it in, you were a detective at the time when this happened.
Yeah, that's how long ago.
So there's a lot of steps in there along the way. So go ahead.
Again, he was in the penitentiary.
Now, how old is he right now?
So I'll share that with you, but he it's actually part of the story. So Bottini, who was a retired city sergeant, and I had hired as a law enforcement analyst in the city of Brentwood, who's sitting at the desk, and in walks,
He's good at it too.
He's very good at it, and a great friend and a great guy. Anyway, Lowe walks into the Brentwood Police Department, just out of the blue, after he got out of the penitentiary, and he said, I'd like to speak to Chief Spiess. Well, Lowe presents himself as a guy to a guy like Tom Bottini. He's a kid that was a hood guy, but now he's 50-something years old, right? So Tommy says, hey, he said, wait, he comes in my office. He goes, you know some guy named D'Angelo? I go, yeah. He said he's in the vestibule. He wants to talk to you. I go, is he armed? And Bo says, I don't know. Well, so I go out there. I say hi to him and shake his bad right hand when he got that shot 100 years ago.
Limp right hand.
So I bring him in my office. You know, I remember thinking as I'm walking back of the van story of him having a gun in the van, and I thought, you know what?
Has anybody searched this? Dude?
And Tommy, I thought, you know what?
This is my time.
I've had my life. Yeah, I've had my life.
This will be a great story.
Yeah, my buddies like this funny shit if I get my head blown off in my office
later.
in a chief's office in Brentwood. So I call him, man. He's this typical low, you know, funny, laughing. We're telling stories about the old days, you know. I asked him whether or not he killed a guy in a rug. We were just laughing, you know. It was just kind of a good half-hour visit. And he said, Joe, man, I need a job. And I said, are you straight? Because he only been out of jail for a week or two.
Damn.
And because I thought, you know, I mean, he had a horrible heroin habit when he was back then, you know. I said, Lo, I can't help you if you're going to be a drug addict and you're going to not come to work and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I'm telling you, I promise you, I will come to work when they tell me, and I'll work hard when I'm here. Can you help me find a job? I said, let me look. So he leaves. And I called Dan Gummersheimer, who was in charge of public works. I go, hey, I was honest with him. I go, here's what you're dealing with. He goes, the only thing I got is a guy that slings trash. I go, that's fine. That's perfect. You know, it's a job. And it's a good job. You know, they didn't pay a ton, but got benefits.
Right.
And Lowe's health
Insurance,
at the time was
the whole
not
bit.
good. You know, his health was failing him. He was, I guess years of drug abuse didn't help him. Anyway, so he does. He comes on Brentwood. He's there, I don't even remember, months, maybe a year. I don't even know what it was, you know. So there's a gal in Brentwood, and she's not well. She had mental health issues, but she liked the trash man.
She's a resident?
Yes.
Okay.
There's
nothing wrong with that.
She took
that's how shit happens. It's like
took
the
a
pool
liking to
boy.
Low, right?
Pool boy, trash
he's got
boy,
personality.
whatever it is.
He's got a lot of
Great personality.
Right.
Anyway, they hook up, right? So, and she had been a persistent and still is a consistent problem in Brentwood with neighbors and things like that. She wasn't well. She's probably better now, I hope. At any rate, she liked her some Low, the trash man.
She liked her Low.
So Low started visiting her. All right.
All right.
Yeah. So he'd go over to her house, and, as I came to find out, and he has a massive heart attack after whatever they were doing in this girl's house, in this woman's house. So the Brentwood Fire Department goes over there and they saved his life. D'Angelo, they saved him. They brought him back to life at the house. He was in full cardiac arrest.
This is great. I didn't know this part of the story.
So he goes.
So you're the best man in his wedding now.
You didn't have to know the background story of this woman. But anyway, so they take him to the hospital, and only in D'Angelo's world, they get him to the hospital. They get him stable. Within hours, he's stable because of. And we have a fantastic fire department and paramedics in Brentwood. And the man walked out.
Damn.
Told him he didn't want it anymore. He said, I don't want any medical treatment. His heart's blocked up, obviously, like crazy. And he walked out of the hospital and said, I'm good. And he showed up for work the Monday. That he was dead on the floor like the 2 days prior. He comes to work Monday morning, starts slinging trash again.
Holy
well,
cow.
at least he stood by his word not to screw you, right?
Yeah.
He said, I'll show up every
absolutely.
day.
So he comes back to work for a few weeks, and then life ended for him. He
Had another heart attack.
had another heart attack. He had a massive heart attack.
I was up and down his whole story, man. Like I'm rooting for the guy.
But God rest his soul. But to end that story,
You spoke at his funeral.
well, no, but his brother. So as D'Angelo got hired on by our city, his brother also needed a job, right? So D'Angelo's brother got hired in Brentwood to sling trash, right? I don't know the guy's background. I didn't ask. But it was kind of cool because when D'Angelo died, I was going to go to his funeral, but I actually was on vacation and out of town. I was going to go, but I didn't go because I was out of town. But his mom and his brother both called me and said thanks. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. And that's why I
So
just
his
wanted
brother
to get
didn't have
this
a heart
story.
attack. He's still alive?
Yeah.
Still working?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because this story was going
Yeah.
crazy.
And I think his mom, as far as I know, was his mom, who was elderly at the time, and all this when he got out of prison. As far as I know, she's still around too.
To me, and and we're going to bring some more of those kind of stories to you. The other side, we've got some people that were on the other side of law enforcement that are going to come on the show and talk about their dealings with the police. And I think that's a great way. This is a great story to kind of lead into those kind of stories, because it's not all about this us against them. Sometimes there are relationships that are built through these interviews and through what goes on in police work, and on the other side, that sometimes long time relationships are built. And I know several police officers that still are in contact with people they've locked up. And just because you were on the other side 10, 20 years ago doesn't mean you can't change your course and get things right. And a lot of these people respect the police after they've gone through it.
If you treat them fairly, and if you if you get and if you treat them like human beings when you arrest them, and they respect you for it.
Right.
And if I've locked up numerous people over and over again, and I've always treated them fair, and I see them on the street to this day, and they're always glad to see me and would talk to me.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird dynamic for officers that have been in those really strong, violent urban settings. We see the way these kids are thrown into life,
right.
And you understand how challenging it is to come out of that kind of environment, right?
The odds are
saw it.
such against them,
Yeah,
to make it out of that.
So there's that piece going in that you as rationally you know what these people have dealt with coming up as kids, and so there's always that piece of it, But I found when I was a policeman that I knew a lot of guys like D'Angelo. That, truth be told, if he had a different upbringing, we'd be probably sitting at the same table, maybe as a policeman,
right,
but certainly sitting at a table having a beer together.
Right.
Because there was a piece of D'Angelo that was a violent, horrible person, and there was a piece of him that was a good guy.
And and just coming from DEA and dealing with a lot of drug cases over the years and informants and everything else, these guys are really likable people.
Can be, yeah.
They can be really and they do have a violent side, but that drug game,
that's a survival side.
Exactly. They have to go into a survival portion of it, and like I said, I don't mean to keep going back to the Italian mafia, but it's the same kind of concept. If you sign up for that game, and you want to get into the gangs and the dope dealing, those are expected results at times. It's unfortunate. That's just the way it is. But some of these people, and I should say some, not all of them, were extremely likable. And you're going to hear stories about that throughout our podcast, that these guys, although they were very dangerous people, they were funny. I mean, they used to make me, when I sit on wires, man, some of the conversations I would listen to they were just funny. Right.
It's kind of a self-prophecy, though, for folks in that environment, though, because they would get in the dope game, and they would eventually involve kids around the neighborhoods, and the next thing you know, you're making another set of dope men.
Well, I won't say his name, but he was an informant that used to call all of us, and he was
345.
He was
245.
But when Stanzi, Joe can tell you the story. When Stanzi passed away, he called Joe and said he was sorry for his loss.
Absolutely. No, and 245, and the reason we called him 245, we called him 2:45 actually, because he used to call, and then if we didn't react, because at any time an informant would do a good job, we would give him money. That's just the way life was. That's how the world works.
He was documented. He was a documented informant.
So he would call, and he had great information 90% of the time.
50-50.
Yeah. But he was good.
He was.
But he would, and then when you wouldn't react to his calls, so he would used to call us when we were in narcotics and MVOP at like midnight. Like, hey, man, we're getting off. We don't want to react to your, he'd say, this guy's over here selling heroin. Well, then when he caught on to the fact that we wouldn't respond immediately to just a dude on the street selling heroin, he would add in that the guy had 245s. So we called him 245, and then that ended up into 2:45, so the man's name ended up to be 2:45.
I stopped him one time, or I didn't stop him, but bunch of people, we stopped in a gas station, and they all sat on the curb, And I didn't recognize him. I didn't recognize him at first. And he's looking at me, and I made eye contact with him, and he kept giving me the old head nod, like looking like
You look at that other
like,
dude.
that guy's dirty, dude. That guy's dirty. and I turn around and start laughing. I said, "Hey man, we need to search this guy over here." And he was right on the money, but he kept looking at me, give me the old.
About 6 months ago, 245 walked into the Brentwood Police Department. Walked up to the window, talked to Tom Bottini. I need to see the chief of police. Walks in, he goes, "Do you know this man?" I said, "Oh yeah, I know. He's in the lobby. He wants to see you." I said, "All right." So 245 comes into my office. He goes, he called me Joe Man too. He said, Joe Man, I got this going on in my life. I got that going on. I need some money. I'm like, I go, "All right, dude. What do you need?" He goes, I think he said $300. I said, which isn't a lot of money, you know.
Right, for you, it's not.
And I've known this. I've known this man for 20 years, you know. And I was like, "All right, dude." I go, "Hang on a minute." So I had to run down to the bank.
Hey, you tell him.
You should have told him to call Cruz.
Call me.
He used to do.
I'll turn him on to my guys.
So I run down, get him $300. I come back, meet him in the parking lot. People probably thought the chief was doing a dope deal.